If someone sees this video, I hope it's because they don't know what to do. Right now you will see unique footage. Thousands of Russians lie beneath Pokrovsk, as the attempt to enter the Ukrainian city will finish off the Russian army, and why the Z community is dissatisfied. Stunning strikes on the occupiers' oil facilities. Orenburg Orgzintes, the Saratov oil refinery, and the Feodosia oil terminal are all on fire. The war will last another 2 years. A prediction from Putin's buddy Robert Fico. Europe is not afraid of the Kremlin and is ready to fight for Ukraine. Germany will provide Kiev with weapons worth 12 billion euros next year. The Ukrainian armed forces will have artillery and patriots. All of this right now. Friends, welcome to Anton's Debrief Project. A commentator from the YouTube channel Vochto. Anton, hello, we're glad to see you.
Hello, likewise.
Anton, could you please tell us about Pokrovsk? It's currently the hottest topic, with various reports coming in. For example, Deep State reports that the Russians are advancing on Pokrovsk with a force of 300 people. Nevertheless, Oleksandr Syrsky recently said that at this moment, the logistics have not been cut off. That is, the supply to our group, our defenders, is ongoing, not from a military perspective, but from a political one, which is your professional field. What does Pokrovsk mean for the Russians? What do you think about this city now when you read the news coming from the front?
The first piece of news. Well, of course, everyone saw those images last night when some remnants of the Russian army supposedly entered into Pokrovsk from the Donetsk side, and you look at these images and they are horrifying. Well, we've all gotten used to calling them orcs and all that, but here you're looking at real footage. It's like Mad Max, except there it was beautiful and harmonious, and here you realize it's the 21st century, and these freaks are literally moving like orcs in the fog on whatever they can find. On motorcycles, just like the German army at its worst in 42, they roll into the city in exactly the same way, and the footage itself is, of course, horrifying. Now, as for whether this will help Putin or not, naturally, he wants the entire Donetsk region. The goals he has set for himself will be very difficult for him to achieve. And even if tomorrow he somehow manages to take Pokrovsk, it doesn't change anything. Because besides Pokrovsk, as you all know very well, there are still plenty of cities there that will defend themselves. And so, yes, with senseless sacrifices, enormous losses, and human wave assaults, they will do this, they will keep doing it to the very end until their last breath. But to say, even if tomorrow he comes out and says, "We took Pokrovsk," the only question everyone will have, well, at least normal people, even the Z supporters will say, "So what?" That's just how I see it.
But it's also important to understand here, yes, that the number of Russian losses, let's remind everyone once again, the 7th Air Assault Corps reports that in just the past few days, 250 enemy soldiers were killed, 140 wounded, a tank was destroyed, 3 armored fighting vehicles, and 23 pieces of automotive and motorized equipment were destroyed. You mentioned that Putin will come out and say, "We have taken," as they call it, Krasnoarmysk. By the way, yes, I think they call the Ukrainian Pokrovsk that. No. By the way, while the fighting is still ongoing in the industrial zone, it's too early to talk about capturing it, but still. So what will his goal be for his propaganda if even the Z supporters say, "And then what?"
The goals have long been mixed up, blurred, and no one understands them anymore. Confusion is starting even among those who support, who shout about our victory, who support Putin and support the special military operation. They've been unclear and ambiguous for a long time now. You see, when I say if they don't take Pokrovsk tomorrow, of course, no one is actually talking about capturing it. But the point is, you should understand in advance why you're doing it. There should be some kind of strategic goal behind it. There isn't one. It's exactly the same here. He'll come out, he'll say it, and no one will have any answers as to why. We just keep working. Everything is going according to plan. Nothing more.
I see. Let's talk about another tool with you. I think it's important. Once again, there was a strike on an oil depot in temporarily occupied Crimea. Special operations forces hit it very effectively. It's called Fardiska in the Simferopol district. Drones hit the pumping station. In addition, there was a strike on the port of Tuapse in the last day and a half. The port was attacked, explosions were heard, and in fact there were direct hits, as I understand it, specifically on the ships.
Besides that, in Bashkortostan, the resistance movement, basically in Vologda, which is all Bashkiria, is destroying the occupiers' logistics chains, meaning their supply lines. Here we're talking about the fact that equipment from 3 communication towers was burned, as well as a railway relay cabinet and so on. In your opinion, can Putin's advances at the front be offset by what Ukrainian drones are doing every day, namely destroying Russia's oil industry? We'll talk about logistics later. So could it be that on our side, this really is that, slow but steady advance? Okay, you're moving forward at the front, but we're destroying your entire oil infrastructure. What do you think? Well, of course, because he's just taking over dug up land, rocks, sand, dust, and in exchange for that, Ukrainian geese are flying and depriving the Kremlin of its main means to continue the war. But in essence, he's capturing nothing. He's taking over ground that's already been pulverized into concrete dust. Meanwhile, back in Russia, his economy is collapsing, oil refineries are being destroyed, and the entire oil industry is falling apart.
Let's talk about something else now. They're gathering reservists there to defend critically important facilities. And in this context, I want to ask you, will the Russians even be able to not only restructure their economy for war, but also their society, to actually force it to mobilize? Will they go for another wave of mobilization? Because it's already clear that they can't even manage to protect the facilities within Russia itself.
That's a very broad question. First of all, putting the economy on a war footing, that's impossible for one simple reason. Because the guys in Putin's inner circle want to make money. And a war economy means everything just gets burned up on the battlefield. We all understand this perfectly well, even though I'm not an economist, even I get it. When suddenly you have no money left, it all just burned up, especially if something then happens at those same factories, plus the oil industry. So you can put the economy on a war footing when you actually have an economy. But when there is no economy, it's impossible to put it on a war footing. Now, as for the people, obviously it's all a complete scam. They're trying, the mobilization continues, it hasn't stopped. And since there are fewer and fewer people willing to sign a contract with each passing day, they can't use the word mobilization. So what do we have? We have training camps. We just have military training camps. Right now, this is a very popular topic. They're rounding everyone up, and some people say, oh, well, I won't go to be mobilized. I won't go to Ukraine. No, of course you won't go. But you'll go to the training camps. Oh, well, I guess I'll go to the training camps once in a while, every few years. The next sad fact, people from Russia are writing to me about this. They say out of 160 people sent to the training camps, very few were unable to sign the contract. Out of 160 people from his district, so to speak, where he was coming from, only a few couldn't sign the contract. Plus, as they say...
And what does that mean? What does it mean that they couldn't sign the contract?
They signed, then refused. And...
The others were the others forced to sign?
And what's the idiocy here, he says. They brought us to the training camp, to the exercises, and every day they tell us how great our army is, that we're advancing, we're capturing new territories. And then they say, well, now we need your help. Let's sign the contract. And some people, the ones who can think, say, wait a minute, you just told us that you're winning, that everything is going well for you, so why do you need to send people from the training camp to the front? There's no answer, but still. They weren't trained, but it's just a deception. You'll be guarding some important facilities. You won't be going there. In reality, though, the next day or a week or two later, everyone ends up there anyway.
Okay, I understand you. Let's talk about something else now. There are some interesting aspects in international politics. What's happening with the Russians in this area? Lavrov, after rumors of a possible resignation and having fallen out of favor with Putin, he woke up and said that he was actually planning to meet with Marco Rubio. He also mentioned that our proposals regarding diplomatic property and air travel have been passed on to the American side and that working contacts are currently underway. And he says that it's necessary to communicate regularly and, in fact, to meet with Marco Rubio. This is important for the Ukrainian issue, quoting the Russian foreign minister, as well as for advancing the bilateral agenda. That's why we communicate by phone, preparing for in-person meetings when necessary. Well, first of all, please tell us, in your opinion, will there be a meeting between Lavrov and Rubio? Because on the one hand, it seems that all these bridges were burned after Trump imposed sanctions, but nevertheless, such reports are still coming in. Well, let's move on. In the direction of domestic policy,
Listen, to such a question, the answer could be yes or no. Today they've twisted things around so much, that today they might spit at each other and tomorrow they could be meeting and hugging. But even if they do meet, then what? Well, Putin met with Trump, red carpet, all the formalities, and what was the result? What was the outcome? Even Trump eventually realized that, as it turns out, Putin doesn't want to stop. And then he says it himself. So why did they even meet? And this guy jumped in because rumors started spreading and it got back to him that he was basically being written off. So of course he needs to boost his own standing, score some points and say, like, hey, I'm still here, I can go meet with this one and that one.
Still, Trump keeps meeting with Orban. And besides the fact that Orban asked him to postpone the ban on buying Russian gas, I think he also put in a good word for Putin. What do you think? How does Trump feel about Putin right now? Has he changed his opinion, or is this just a situational, flirtation with distancing, so to speak? Like, I'm going to be tough on you right now, but I still love you.
That's a tough question because love him or not, there's a second question here. I think Putin's attitude toward Trump is unclear. Or rather, let me put it this way. Trump's attitude toward Putin has been unclear this whole time, with all these back and forth moves and nobody really understands it. But in any case, we all know perfectly well that Trump wanted to end the war, and he can't end it for one simple reason: Putin. And I think that after all, the reasonable voices and people in the Oval and rectangular offices have managed to prove one main thing to him, which is... And the only one resisting this is Putin. And even if there is some kind of sympathy, whatever views, relationships, or compromising material, there are all sorts of rumors, we don't know for sure. But eventually, it will all come out. Probably in our lifetime, why he behaves this way. But the fact that he realized Putin doesn't want it, well, I think that's obvious to anyone by now. And that's not a very pleasant realization for him. When you try, you want it, you make an effort, you even blame Ukraine, saying it's their own fault that it takes two people to drive a tank.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Everyone understands this perfectly well, and I think it's been proven to him. There's only one person who doesn't want it.
But nevertheless, what do you think? Love, the reason I asked about it is that it shows a person can act irrationally. If it's now clear that all roads lead to Putin's unwillingness to end the war, do you think Trump is capable of taking the most radical action? Well, in his case, let's say. That's true. An increase in military support for Ukraine, the transfer of missiles we've already discussed so many times. Obviously, there's not even a hint of ATACMS, but nevertheless, there are many other things that could be provided, which the Ukrainian side keeps requesting. For example, medium-range missiles. Tell us about this. Will he go for a concrete increase in military support?
Of course, I'm not a specialist and I don't have any inside information from the Situation Room, but just based on my impressions, or rather, it's already a fact. Why did it turn out this way with the Soviet Union? Because back then there was no strong China. Today, if it weren't for China, dismantling Putin's regime would be no problem at all for the United States of America. Just like with the Soviet Union, the price of oil drops and everything ends very quickly, almost instantly. But if you do that now, and it happens to Russia, then the Far East automatically comes under China's control, with all the resources, which would allow China to advance even further. Right now, even without America, they're already in fierce competition. I think this is the main reason, the absolutely main reason, that prevents them from acting the way they should, and the way they feel they should. Because honestly, dismantling Russia would be lightning fast and easy. Everyone already understands this. Even some people in the West, that Russia is not the world's second army. They can't do anything. They're weak. Their economy is still heading in the wrong direction, not where they planned for themselves. But if you do this tomorrow, China is there. That's why all bets and everything are focused on the future confrontation with China. That's why when Trump flew to see Xi Jinping, of course, I don't think they discussed this issue and they didn't reach what Trump had planned. That's what I think.
Recently, the publication Pokrovsk released an interesting investigation. They reported on the number of Putin's direct relatives who hold positions in the Russian government. Even if we go by the minimum estimate, Putin has placed 25 direct relatives in positions of power. These aren't his judo friends, these aren't his buddies from the Ozero Cooperative. These are specifically people who are part of his dynastic branch. The record holder, of course, is Ramzan Kadyrov. He has more than 96 direct relatives in the governing structures of the Chechen Republic, and not only there, but also, by the way, in the Kremlin. Here's what I want to ask you. To what extent, in your opinion, is what is happening now, namely almost 4 years of full-scale war? I think no one has any doubt that, unfortunately, we will pass the 4-year mark. And I mean in the context that peace will not come before then. How much is Putin's power being shaken? Because some people say that, on the contrary, his power is becoming even more cemented, that everyone is rallying around him. How do you see this process? Could this number of relatives and friends in power at some point really explode and lead to that very black swan event we like to fantasize and speculate about?
First of all, the number of Putin's relatives in power and in financial structures is absolutely not surprising. This is a completely normal system like the Golden Horde, an Asian model. And besides, this goes back to the history of the Soviet Union. It has always been like this everywhere in almost all the republics. As for the masses of people actually exploding in discontent,
but Anton, I wouldn't exactly argue with you, but I would add that many point out that even in the Soviet Union, if we're talking about the post-Stalin period, after Stalinism, there were still collective decisions. There were rivalries, intrigues, attempts to suppress someone else's decisions. But here there is no collegial body at all. It seems like there's just Putin and everything that stems from him.
No, that's absolutely right. That's exactly how it is. I mean, if you have the opportunity to get your relatives a position, I'm talking purely about the psychological aspect. You always will do it. I'm talking specifically about the mentality. That's where it comes from. It's just that, yes, today Putin has unlimited power, and that's why he uses it. In the Soviet Union, yes, there were different factions that competed with each other. Now, regarding the explosion, no, I don't think there will be a popular uprising in the form we're used to seeing in revolutionary films. As for whether Putin's power is being consolidated by the war, definitely not. I'm convinced of that. He wanted that, and he thought it would happen that way. And it would have if they had taken Kyiv in 3 days. Then yes, everyone around would have seen this guy is strong, this guy can do it. So even if we don't agree with him on some things, even if he's an idiot in some ways, we would, just like for the past 25 years, keep feeding at the trough, follow orders, and everything would be fine for us. But today, it's not just that, let's say, broad layers of the population, the so-called rabble, are getting poorer. Even people who are used to living well are getting poorer. Rich people are getting poorer. Those who simply can't make a living are getting poorer. These are the people the regime relies on. That's why, by definition, this cannot possibly hold the regime together.
Anton, while we had a short break, there were several reports coming in about how the oil petrochemical plant was directly hit by an attack, and now, according to the latest information, it's burning very actively and intensely with large flames and thick smoke visible from a distance. All of this is within the territory of the Russian Federation, Orenburg region. The oil refining sector is simply ablaze, including hits on the Saratov region oil refinery, the Feodosia oil terminal, a facility that also helps supply fuel to the occupation army. Could you please explain why I'm asking about this? It's very important to understand. Will the Americans continue, let's say, not to prevent the destruction of Russia's oil industry? In your opinion, is Trump even capable of taking such steps? Okay, we're not providing as much as is needed for a decisive victory, but nevertheless, we're not forbidding the Ukrainian armed forces, and perhaps we're helping with intelligence to destroy facilities that directly bring money to Putin?
I think this decision has already been made, because if it hadn't, Ukraine wouldn't be able to so successfully strike what it is currently hitting on Russian territory. So I think, of course, this is, maybe it's not exactly part of a deal, but at least some kind of agreements like we can't give this, we're lacking that, we're afraid of this, but this is possible, and this too, and that's already quite a lot. So I think, why would he stand in the way? There's enough oil.
Okay, good. And in conclusion, here, Robert Fitz writes that the war in Ukraine will last at least another 2 years if the European Union approves a reparations loan using frozen Russian assets. What do you think, first of all, about the 2-year duration of the war? And secondly, do you think Europeans will actually have the courage to unfreeze the frozen Russian assets?
These are my two favorite characters, two little beasts. That's Fico and Orban, who are working for Volodya Putin's money. And they're doing a pretty good job at it. The statement about 2 years, I think, is purely psychological pressure, an information psychological operation, because, well, obviously, Ukraine is tired, the people are tired. It's hard when you're fighting a war. Any country would be this exhausted, and now when they hear another 2 years, and who will be to blame for that? Naturally, Europe, which is giving you the money. So don't ask Europe for money. Now, regarding the unfrozen assets, I think they will definitely do it. Why is it taking so long? Because it's that very same Western bureaucracy which today is causing problems even for the West itself. But as for whether they'll go through with it, I think yes, they will. It's just that they're trying to address a lot of other issues in many countries, but they're also trying to make sure everything is done legally, properly, cleanly, and correctly.
Okay. And finally, we've just received a fresh update about how Germany plans to increase its military support for Ukraine by almost 12 billion euros in 2026. This is being reported by local media. All of this refers to the draft German budget for 2026. We're talking about artillery, drones, armored vehicles, 2 Patriot systems, and simply the funds Ukraine needs for financing. If we sum it up here, what does this information tell us? Does it mean that Europe is ready to continue the fight or not?
If we speak broadly and bluntly, yes, because they are already beginning to realize that this is an inevitable situation, and all these soothing songs need to be left in the past and preparations must be made for serious resistance. Secondly, I don't think this directly means that the war in Ukraine will continue into 2026 and 2027, but they understand perfectly well that even if everything stops and ends tomorrow, the main guarantee of Ukraine's security is the Ukrainian army itself. And in order for this guarantee to exist properly, it will still need to be supported even after the war, so that it remains combat ready.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. Anton, political commentator and host of the YouTube channel Vochto. All the best to you. Thank you.